Hey guys, first video of this league, and I wanted to give you kind of an overview of what I've been doing. This is my second build. The first build I went with Druid. I wanted to test the shape shifting. Started with Wolf. It felt okay, and I know that it can do good damage, but I later wanted to switch to Wyvern. I think I preferred Wyvern. Wyvern felt like it can do more damage with less setup, and it just in general felt cooler. However, it was very buggy. The Wyvern form, the Hell Breath was very buggy. Both would just stop having animations and visuals, and the cooldown was all messed up. But overall, I think I enjoyed that more. However, I decided to put it away because it was bugged. There was a patch that for the most part fixed issues with it. There's still like one issue that when you do Flame Breath, you have very short amount of time to react. When it finishes, when you run out of rage, it goes down, and then if you hold the button for a bit too long, it starts the animation again, and it takes like 2 or 3 seconds, and you cannot cancel that skill. That's just one remaining annoying part about it. Other than it being a bit slow, the all barrage feeling really strong but a bit clunky with the power charge generation. But either way, I decided to do something bad. Decided to play with the old idea that I had with the blood barrier shield, which applies corrupted blood on enemies on block, and that corrupted blood scales of your life instead of your strength. Normally it's when you apply it with the corrupted cry support, it scales of your strength, but this one scales of your life. However, the condition is you have to block. Also, block got nerfed this league, right? No, or was it last league? I think it was last league. The maximum block is capped at 50% normally. And also this league, they made changes to monster life. Essentially, instead of getting monster pack size with the higher tier waystones, monsters are getting more effectiveness, which essentially increases their life.
So we are no longer going to scale up the number of monsters you go as you get deeper into the end game. Instead, we are scaling up the difficulty and rewards by the same amount. Instead of increasing the number of monsters by 40%, they will instead drop 40% more items, grant 40% more experience, and have 40% more life.
It's kind of double dipping on the drawbacks of doing this build now. One of the viewer, Ayumi, said that last league he did a very like super tanky build with this idea, going hybrid life ES and going with the recoup, and my main problem with this build is single target damage is difficult to scale. You basically have very few increase modifiers on the passive tree, that is generic physical damage. There's no like damage over time multiplier, there's no increased damage over time on the passive tree. All you can get is increased physical damage. Then you can also get a bit of damage from the scaling with the block, and then a bit with the rage. And the rest, if you want, you pretty much have to use the two-handed mace in one hand, the Chubber that scales of minion damage, and then get minion damage. But I'm not sure if point-wise it's actually good. And then you have no more multipliers pretty much. There are no curses to debuff monsters. There's no weapon that would affect this corrupted blood damage because it's not a spell, it's not an attack. There's no easy way to scale the damage. I'm using even Calm's Heart, so I'm sitting at 4.2k life, but I just reached level 68 with this and I decided to quit. I'm missing one ring, I'm missing a lot of things, but I just don't see how this would have good clear. Without Calm's Heart, I would be using Herald of Blood, which kind of helps with clear quite a lot. Then you can use Magma Barrier to increase the block chance. The shield has pretty low base block chance, so scaling block chance is pretty difficult, and you kind of have to either invest a lot into that or just accept that you're not gonna have very high block chance and end up with like 50% block chance and invest into something else like a recoup or just in general. You can't even get increased life on the passive tree. There are like 3 nodes with 3% increased maximum life on the passive tree. So scaling block chance is also kind of difficult. So for now I'm still using these terrible boots. The only good thing about them is 10% to flat block chance. Then it becomes much easier to scale and reach the capped block. So this sort of plays like thorns build, but actually thorns build feels better because you can use melee attacks to add your thorns damage to those melee attacks and even splash, and it just felt better. At least the Witch Hunter thorns build that I did just felt better. This also is not very cheap. right now this build is super cheap because there's nothing expensive on this. If you want to try this build, there are grand spectrum jewels with increased maximum life. Those, the last time I checked, was like 190 Exalt per jewel, and you need 3. So you also need jewel sockets, and jewel sockets could also give you, like, rare jewels can give you increased block chance plus physical damage, and you also want stun threshold if you're gonna be using parry, because when you use parry is a channeling skill that raises shield. When you raise shield, you have 100% block chance, but only if you are facing the enemies. Houston, we have a problem. So that's not a hit. Well, that's a problem. So you don't necessarily need a high block chance, but however, when you use parry, you also stagger enemies out of their attacks. So if they do some kind of burst attack or like barrage attack that would shoot multiple projectiles, they will get staggered out of that attack and only hit you once instead of like 5 times. Maybe not trying to parry is better, because you don't stagger monsters and they can continue. So in some cases this parry is bad, and you cannot use shield charge, you cannot use you cannot use the normal raise shield, which is, I think, better, but parry also works really well because you can stagger some dangerous attacks and just completely ignore them essentially. But applying 10 stacks is a bit more challenging. The Blood Boil also, this is a ritualist that's, I feel like you kind of have to be a ritualist to have decent clear, because Blood Boil works like a corrupted blood. When enemies die, they apply to the surrounding enemies corrupted blood stacks, and those can stack really quickly, and it does have pretty big delay. The enemies have to be in your presence for a certain amount of time to get those stacks stacked before we can apply corrupted blood to surrounding enemies. So one enemy has to die to apply the corrupted stacks to nearby enemies. The AoE is not that big. You also need presence area. There are lots of drawbacks for this, and there's pretty much no benefits, except you can do an AFK tanky build. My other idea was to maybe use a wand and some physical spell, but that would require quite a bit more intelligence, which would pretty much remove strength, and strength is also maximum life. For extra tankiness, you would probably want like Defiance of Destiny, which is expensive, like I said, Grand Spectrum Jewels, which are expensive. So you would be paying quite a lot to make this tanky build with okay-ish damage, not even good damage. It would have pretty bad clear speed. I cannot imagine it having good clear speed. That's my opinion about this. I imagine it would be more fun, but not having any weapon affecting this damage is really bad and kind of boring, to be honest. If you could figure out some other ways to get explosions, and I don't mean just Herald of Blood, because you can do like a double Herald explosion with the Herald of Blood and Herald of Plague, and do bleed plus poison, but not with Calm's Heart, and I'm not sure if it would even be good enough for clear. But at that point, why even use this shield and wait for the block to happen if the damage isn't even that great? By the way, you can get a corrupted shield, which would increase the corrupted blood duration and scaling of your life. So yeah, I'm probably gonna be refunding and reworking this build into something else. I still have not decided what. If you got some interesting ideas for the ritualist, or maybe I guess I could refund into different ascendancy. Wait, can we refund into different ascendancy class? I forgot, in PoE 2. But most likely I will go back to playing with the Druid that I started the league with and push it a bit further until I can figure out some interesting build that is also viable, because I got some ideas, but when I read those ideas again, I feel like all of those ideas would end up being bad. Like totems require power charges, that just sounds super annoying. I had some other idea for living lighting with Smith of Kitava, that's probably also a bad idea. I thought maybe doing some ball lighting, because ball lighting got buffed by like 50% damage increase, and also infusions got like twice more damage now. So maybe ball lighting, because previously ball lighting was really bad for single target and in general for damage. So I'm not sure if it is enough of a buff. So if you actually played with the ball lighting, let me know in the comments below. Is ball lighting now viable as a main damage source? Because if so, I have some build ideas that I would like to experiment with. And also let me know in the comments below if you played, because I haven't heard anyone talking about spell druid, not necessarily druid, but spell with the druid skills, like those plant skills and thunderstorm. I played with him at the start of the league. It felt like it could do damage, but it was very delayed and kind of awkward to use, so I'm not sure how it feels later on. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.